My mother did not recognize me when I walked into the funeral home. Not because of my haircut, because the name on the guest book was not the one she gave me. For a moment, her face tightened in confusion, and I watched her eyes drag across the letters of my new signature as if she were reading the name of a stranger. In a way, she was. Months earlier, I had still been Lauren Mitchell, the quiet middle child who handled everyone's forgotten tasks and emergencies. I woke early, stayed late, and filled in all the gaps my family left behind. When Emily forgot to pay her rent, I transferred the money. When Ryan crashed his car, I handled the insurance forms. When my mother needed someone to coordinate a family reunion, I did every detail from the invitations to the seating chart. I had been their safety net for so long that they forgot I had a life outside theirs. The day everything shifted was a Thursday morning in late spring. I had spent 2 years developing a major sustainability project for the company I worked for, a presentation that could have changed the direction of my career. It was the kind of achievement families usually celebrate. But hours before the event, my phone lit up with a message in the family group chat. Emily announced she was hosting a last-minute congratulatory brunch for her own minor promotion. Within minutes, my parents and Ryan responded with plans, photos, and excitement. No one asked about my presentation. No one even remembered it was the same day. I stared at the screen, realizing with a strange calm that they would not show up. Not now, not ever, not for anything that mattered to me. It was not anger that settled in my chest. It was clarity. A quiet, sharp understanding that I no longer wanted to stand in a life where I had been invisible for decades. That night, instead of crying or confronting anyone, I opened a browser tab and typed, "How to legally change your name." I did not know what I was expecting when I searched for name change information. Maybe something complicated, an obstacle that would force me back into the role I already knew too well. Instead, the instructions were simple. Forms, fees, a court date, a judge who did not care about family dynamics, only whether my request was lawful and clear. I read every line slowly, my eyes moving across the screen while the familiar sounds of my apartment hummed in the background. The refrigerator clicked on. Cars passed outside. Somewhere in the distance, a train horn cut through the night. The city did not know my name. The court did not care about my history. For the first time, that felt like an advantage. I printed the forms and stacked them on the table. As the pages slid out of the printer, I remembered all the times I had filled out paperwork for other people. College applications for Ryan because he hated forms. Medical insurance appeals for Emily when she missed deadlines. Loan documents for my parents when they refinanced the house. I had always been the one who understood the fine print, the one they called when something looked confusing. No one was here now, and the forms on the table were only for me. I sat down with a pen and wrote a name in the first blank space. Not Mitchell. I picked Ross instead, a quiet tribute to my grandmother on my father's side, the only person in my family who ever remembered my birthday without a reminder. She used to send handwritten letters with small notes of encouragement, simple sentences that made it clear she saw me as my own person, not just the support system for everyone else. She had passed away years earlier, but her name still felt like a gentle hand at my back. Lauren Ross. The letters looked unfamiliar at first, like a coat that did not quite fit yet. I traced them once with the tip of my finger, then again with the pen as I filled out the rest of the form. My address, my date of birth, my reasoning, personal choice. That was all the law required. The next days moved quietly, but with a different weight. At work, I still answered emails, still attended meetings, still prepared reports. No one there knew what I did at night, hunched over my small kitchen table with folders spread around me. I created a checklist. Driving license, bank accounts, email addresses, insurance policies, professional records. Every place my old name lived, I marked with a small square beside it. Each square would be checked off later. I did not announce anything in the family group chat. I did not ask if anyone could come to the hearing. I knew the answer already. They would be busy. There would be brunches, errands, children's soccer games, new crises that needed my help. I had spent my entire life arranging my schedule around theirs. This process would be the first thing I did without telling them at all. The first sign that something inside me had truly shifted came one evening when my mother called. "Lauren, can you swing by on Sunday and help Emily with her tax stuff?" she asked, as if nothing about my life had changed since yesterday. "I cannot," I said. There was a pause. "You mean you are busy? We can move it. She really needs you to look at some forms." "I am not available," I repeated. Another silence. I could picture her frowning, trying to understand how something as basic as my availability could be a fixed thing, not flexible around her needs. "Well," she said finally, "we will figure it out." She hung up without asking what I would be doing. She did not know that Sunday would be the day I went to the courthouse to file my petition. She did not ask, and I did not offer. The courthouse was smaller than I expected. Bright overhead lights, beige walls, a waiting area that smelled faintly like coffee and cleaning supplies. I turned in my forms, paid the fee, and listened while the clerk explained the next steps. There would be a hearing date, a simple appearance, a decision. As I walked back out into the cold air, the city noise pressed in around me. Horns, voices, footsteps. I stood on the sidewalk holding the stamped copy of my petition, feeling the texture of the paper against my palms. Somewhere behind me, in a house filled with framed photos of my siblings, my old life continued without any interruption. They did not know it yet, but the person they relied on for everything had just started the process of leaving. That night, I opened a blank document on my laptop and typed 3 lines at the top. New name, new address, new life. I did not know where that new life would be yet, only that it had to be somewhere far enough away that I would not be tempted to slip back into old roles. I thought of the times I had Googled cities just to see what other lives looked like. One tab still sat open from weeks earlier, a search for jobs in Vancouver. I clicked it now. For the first time, I did not look at the listings as if they belonged to someone braver. I looked at them as if they belonged to me. The morning after I filed the petition, something in my routine shifted. Not in a dramatic way. No sudden resolve, no cinematic transformation. It was quieter than that, almost unnoticeable. I woke up, made coffee, and instead of checking my family's group chat out of habit, I turned my phone face down and let it stay that way. I spent that entire weekend researching Vancouver. Neighborhoods, transit lines, cost of living, companies hiring in my field. I filled a notebook with potential apartments and job postings, drawing small stars next to the ones that felt promising. For years, I had planned my life around what my family needed. Now I was planning around only one question. What do I want? The answer surprised me. I wanted distance. Not anger, not revenge, just space. Enough space to breathe, enough silence to hear my own thoughts without someone immediately needing something from me. I applied to 6 jobs that weekend. I updated my resume under the name I would soon legally have. It felt strange typing it, like I was drafting a version of myself I had only imagined before. But the more I saw it on the page, the more it began to feel real. 3 days later, an email arrived. We would like to schedule an interview for the environmental data analyst position. I read the sentence twice, then a third time, almost expecting the words to rearrange into something ordinary. But they stayed the same. For the first time in years, an opportunity had arrived that belonged solely to me. I scheduled the interview for Friday afternoon. On Friday morning, Emily texted, "Lauren, I need you to pick up some decorations for the party on Sunday. Please. I am overwhelmed, and Mom said you are usually good with this stuff." I stared at the message for a long moment. There had been a time when I would have left work early, driven across the city, and handled the entire party for her without being asked twice. But that version of me was dissolving, piece by piece. I typed a response. "I cannot. I have plans." I hit send before I could second-guess myself. Her reply came within minutes. "Seriously, I really need you. You are the only one who knows how to do these things right." I looked at her message, feeling no familiar pull of obligation. Instead, I felt a strange detachment, like I was reading a stranger's request. I did not respond. That afternoon, I sat in a small conference room at work with my laptop open, waiting for the interview to begin. When the camera connected, I straightened my shoulders and introduced myself as Lauren Ross. The name flowed more naturally than I expected. The interviewers were warm, attentive, and genuinely interested in my experience. For the first time in years, I spoke without shrinking, without worrying that someone else's needs would interrupt me. When I closed my laptop afterward, I sat there for a moment, breathing quietly. I had done something for myself, something unconnected to my family. 2 days later, I received an offer. Full-time, relocation assistance included. Start date flexible. I accepted it before I even told anyone. I didn't need permission. I didn't need approval. I didn't need to ask whether the timing worked for everyone else's schedules. When the court date for my name change hearing arrived, it was a cold, clear morning. I wore a navy coat, simple and warm, and walked into the courthouse with my head high. The judge asked a few basic questions. I answered calmly. It took less than 10 minutes for him to sign the order. "Congratulations, Miss Ross." The words echoed in my mind long after I stepped outside. On the sidewalk, I took a slow breath. For the first time in my life, my name belonged to me alone. I spent the next week in a whirlwind of preparation. I updated my driver's license, my bank accounts, my work email. I purchased a one-way ticket to Vancouver. I packed boxes late into the night, labeling each one neatly. Clothes, books, documents, essentials. What I felt was not excitement. It was deeper than that. A quiet steadiness, like the ground had finally stopped shaking beneath me. The day before my move, my mother called. "Lauren, are you coming to Emily's dinner on Saturday? She wants you there. We all do." The message felt like an echo of a life I no longer lived. I responded with the same stillness I carried in every part of my new life. "I am moving to Vancouver tomorrow." There was a long, abrupt silence on the line. "What? Why? For how long?" she asked, her voice incredulous, as if she could not comprehend that I had a direction she did not choose. "Indefinitely," I said. "I accepted a job there." "You accepted a job without telling anyone?" "I didn't need to." Her inhale was sharp, almost offended. "Lauren, you cannot just disappear like that. We need you here." "No," I said softly. "You need what I do for you, not me." Before she could respond, I ended the call. I did not block her. I simply turned the phone off, placed it in a drawer, and walked away from it. At dawn, I left the city I had grown up in, carrying only what I needed. I did not look back. Vancouver greeted me with a kind of quiet I had never known. The sky was overcast, the air cool, and the streets carried a calm rhythm that felt nothing like Chicago. The taxi dropped me off in front of a small apartment building with cedar trim and wide windows, overlooking a narrow street lined with trees. I stood there for a moment with my luggage beside me, listening to the hum of a city that did not know my history or my old name. The apartment was modest, one bedroom with pale walls and a balcony barely big enough for a chair. But when I stepped inside, I felt something shift. It was the first space I had ever chosen without considering someone else's needs. I walked from room to room, running my fingers along the empty countertops and the edges of the windows. The apartment was quiet, but the silence felt different from the silence of home. It wasn't dismissive. It wasn't heavy. It was mine. My first weeks in Vancouver moved more simply than I expected. At the office, people introduced themselves without asking who I was related to or what I could fix for them. My manager, Daniel Ross, greeted me with a warm handshake and an easy smile. "You must be Lauren," he said. "We're really glad to have you here." It was the first time anyone had said something like that without expecting me to prove my worth immediately afterward. The work itself felt meaningful. I reviewed environmental impact reports, ran data models, and sat through project meetings where my ideas were asked for, not brushed aside. Daniel often stopped by my desk to check in, sometimes just to ask if I needed anything. He never demanded, never assumed, never leaned on me the way my family did. One afternoon, after a long meeting, Daniel paused by my desk. "You settled in okay?" he asked. "Yes," I said, and realized I meant it. He smiled. "Good, you seem like someone who's been carrying a lot for a long time." The comment caught me off guard. I didn't reply, and he didn't push. He simply nodded and walked away, leaving me with a feeling I couldn't define. Someone had noticed something about me without needing anything from me in return. That small observation stayed with me. In the evenings, I unpacked at my own pace. I framed photos of landscapes I loved instead of the obligatory family pictures that used to hang in my old apartment. I bought a small plant for the windowsill. I organized my kitchen cabinet by cabinet. Each decision felt like a slow process of claiming space I had never been allowed to take before. It wasn't long before the first ripple from the life I left behind found its way to me. An email from HR at my new company appeared one morning. Emergency contact request denied. Your previous contacts are listed as unverified and could not be reached. I stared at it for a long moment. My old number was no longer active. My old email had been shut down. Nothing on my new legal documents pointed back to Chicago. The company had simply followed protocol. They tried to reach my parents. They failed. They moved on. Later that week, my apartment building's management forwarded a voicemail. Your family is looking for a forwarding address. We told them we cannot provide it without written consent. I deleted the message and set my phone down, feeling a quiet clarity settle in my chest. This was the result of choices I had made carefully, intentionally. This wasn't revenge. This was separation. But separation doesn't stay silent forever. One evening, as I sat on the balcony with a cup of tea, the city lights flickering below me, I felt a strange mixture of relief and heaviness. I wasn't lonely. I just wasn't used to being alone without being needed. That night, I turned on the old phone I had tucked away in my suitcase. There were 57 missed calls, dozens of messages, some frantic, some angry, some confused. Lauren, why are you doing this? Where did you go? You can't just leave like this. We need to talk. You owe us an explanation. I powered the phone off again before I could finish reading them. The silence that followed felt like exhaling after holding my breath for years. Then came the message that changed everything. Great Aunt Margaret has passed away. Service is next week in Minnesota. We expect you to be there. They didn't ask. They demanded, as if my attendance was still something they owned. I stared at the message for a long time. Aunt Margaret had been the only person besides my grandmother who ever spoke to me like I mattered. She sent me postcards from every place she traveled, always signing them with a line that made me feel seen. You're stronger than they know. I knew then that I would go. Not for my family, for her, but I would go on my terms, under my name, in my life, as the person they chose not to notice until she was gone. I booked a flight to Minnesota 2 days before the service. Not a direct flight, nothing convenient, just whatever was available at the time I decided to go. I packed lightly, choosing a charcoal dress and a long, simple coat. As I zipped the suitcase, I realized something that startled me with its simplicity. I felt calm, not anxious, not bracing for impact, just calm. The morning of my flight, Vancouver was covered in a thin layer of fog that drifted between the buildings like slow-moving smoke. I rode to the airport with my headphones in, listening to nothing, just using them as a quiet boundary between myself and the world. When I reached the terminal, I moved through security with the ease of someone who knew exactly where she was going and who she was going as. My travel documents all bore the same name now, Lauren Ross. No one flinched. No one questioned it. There was no shadow of my old life attached to the new one printed in clean black ink on my boarding pass. When the plane landed in Minnesota, the air felt different, heavier, colder, carrying the faint smell of winter even though spring had already begun. I took a shuttle to a small hotel near the funeral home. The room was plain but warm, with crisp white sheets and a small lamp that cast a soft glow across the wall. I set my suitcase down and stood by the window, watching the quiet street below. Cars rolled past slowly. People walked with their hands in their pockets. Everything felt muted, as if the world was holding its breath. The next morning, I dressed early, tying my coat belt with steady hands. I didn't rush. I didn't rehearse what I would say. I wasn't going there for them. The funeral home was modest, with stone steps leading to double doors framed by tall windows. I walked inside just as a few early guests were signing the guest book. I stepped up to the podium, lifted the pen, and signed, Lauren Ross. The ink had barely dried when I heard the sharp intake of breath behind me. I turned slightly. My mother stood frozen just beyond the doorway, her eyes fixed on the page. She scanned the name once, then again, disbelief tightening her jaw. She whispered almost to herself, You changed your name. Not a question, not sorrow. A reaction to losing control. I didn't respond. I stepped aside and walked into the chapel. Rows of chairs faced a simple arrangement of flowers and a framed picture of Aunt Margaret. I took a seat near the aisle, choosing a spot that gave me a clear view of the room. My family entered moments later. Emily's eyes widened the moment she saw me. Ryan stopped mid-step. My father's expression collapsed into something between confusion and something else he didn't want to show. None of them came to sit beside me. I didn't expect them to. As the service began, I focused on the minister's words, letting the memories of Aunt Margaret soften the edges of the room. She had been one of the few people who wrote me handwritten notes when I was young. Notes that said things like, "I'm proud of you. Keep going. You're not invisible." I kept those letters tucked inside a box in my apartment in Vancouver. I thought about them now, about how they had carried me through moments that felt too heavy to name. After the service, people gathered in small circles, murmuring condolences, sharing stories, drifting between conversations. I stayed back, letting the crowd thin. I wanted one last moment before I left, but my mother stepped in front of me, blocking my path. Her voice was low, almost trembling. "What have you done, Lauren?" "Something necessary," I said. "You blindsided us, you made a spectacle, you changed your name without telling anyone. You don't get to ask about decisions you weren't part of." She stiffened. "We are your family." I held her gaze. "Family shows up. You didn't." Emily approached then, crossing her arms tightly. "This is dramatic, even for you. You could have talked to us instead of whatever this is. You never listened when I tried." My father said nothing at first. He just looked at me with a quiet heaviness, the kind that comes from realizing something too late. "We didn't know you felt this way." "Yes," I said. "You did. You just ignored it." For a moment, they all stood silent, absorbing a truth that had been years in the making. My mother tried once more. "You went too far." "No," I replied quietly. "I finally went far enough." I walked past them, stepped out into the cold air, and felt something loosen inside me, not relief, not triumph, just release. Behind me, the door closed softly. They had lost access to my life the same way I had lost access to theirs for years. The difference was simple. I had chosen it. Outside the funeral home, the wind pressed gently against my coat, carrying the kind of cold that sharpened everything it touched. I walked toward the small lot where my rental car was parked, each step steady and unhurried. For most of my life, this would have been the moment when guilt caught up to me, when I would turn around, apologize, smooth everything over, return to the role they expected. But the guilt wasn't there, not even faintly. When I started the car, the engine hummed softly, a calm counterpoint to the noise gathering behind me inside that building. I could almost picture them, my mother pacing, Emily complaining, Ryan shaking his head, my father sinking into his usual quiet. They would not be talking about Aunt Margaret. They would be talking about me, about the person they assumed was still waiting to be pulled back into their orbit. I drove toward the hotel without looking back. Later that evening, as I sat on the edge of the bed with a cup of tea cooling in my hands, I felt the throb of an old instinct rising. The instinct to check my messages. The instinct to anticipate demands before they arrived. The instinct to prepare myself for drama I would be ordered to fix. I took a slow breath and ignored all of it. Instead, I opened my laptop, logged into my email, and confirmed my return flight to Vancouver for the next morning. My phone remained powered off on the nightstand, silent, unimportant, a relic from a life I no longer belonged to. There was a small knock on my hotel door just after 8 p.m. I didn't expect anyone. When I opened it, my father stood there. He looked older than I remembered, not physically. Just tired in a way I hadn't noticed before, maybe because I had always been too busy trying to keep everyone afloat to stop and truly see him. "Lauren," he said quietly, "can we talk?" For a moment, I considered closing the door. But there was something in his expression I didn't recognize, an uncertainty, a hesitation that didn't come from authority or disappointment. It came from fear, not the fear of losing control. That belonged to my mother. This was the fear of someone realizing he had missed something he should have protected. I stepped aside and let him in. He sat on the small chair by the window while I sat on the corner of the bed. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. He looked around the room as if expecting signs of the daughter he thought he knew. "You caught us off guard today," he said finally. "I didn't intend to," I replied. "I just showed up as myself." He nodded slowly. "Your mother, she didn't mean to sound harsh." I looked at him steadily. "She meant exactly what she said. She always does." He exhaled, the sound weary. "We thought you were fine. You never complained." "I did," I said, "just not loudly enough for anyone to care." The truth hung between us, heavy but calm. He shifted in the chair. "Your new name, your new life, is this really what you want?" I didn't raise my voice. I didn't defend myself. I simply said, "Yes." He looked down at his hands. "I'm sorry we weren't there for you the way we should have been." I waited. I had learned long ago that apologies meant nothing without change. He seemed to search for more words, something substantial, something that might undo years of neglect. But nothing came. He stood slowly. "I hope we can fix things someday." "I hope you learn from this," I said. "But fixing things isn't my responsibility anymore." He nodded again, and for once the silence didn't feel like something I was expected to fill. He walked to the door, paused, and glanced back. "You always deserved better than what you got," he said. I didn't thank him. I didn't reassure him. I simply let him go. When the door shut, the room grew quiet again. Not empty, just quiet. A clean quiet. The next morning, I left the hotel before sunrise. The sky was still dark, faintly blue near the horizon. I rolled my suitcase down the hallway, checked out, and waited for the airport shuttle in the crisp morning air. My breath formed small clouds in front of me. On the plane, I sat by the window and watched Minnesota fade into a patchwork of distant fields. Then clouds. Then sky. Somewhere between takeoff and landing, I realized something I had never allowed myself to understand before. Leaving wasn't the hardest choice. Staying had been. When I stepped back into the soft drizzle of Vancouver, it felt like walking into a life that had been quietly waiting for me to claim it. Vancouver welcomed me back with the familiar softness of gray skies and the steady whisper of rain against pavement. I took the train from the airport, watching the city move past the window in blurred streaks of steel, glass, and evergreen trees. No one here knew where I had been. No one here expected anything from me. The anonymity felt like a blanket pulled gently around my shoulders. When I reached my apartment, I unlocked the door and stepped inside, breathing in the quiet. Nothing had changed while I was away. My plant still sat on the windowsill. My notes and reports were still spread neatly across my desk. The space had waited for me, not to fix it, not to care for it, but simply to return. I set my suitcase by the door and sat on the edge of the couch. For a brief moment, the funeral, the confrontation, the hotel room, everything I had just lived, floated through my mind like a fading storm cloud drifting out to sea. It no longer felt sharp. It no longer felt raw. It felt distant. A single envelope lay on the coffee table where I had left it before the trip. My final documents from the court. My name change confirmations sealed and stamped. I picked up the envelope and ran my thumb along the edge, then opened it and unfolded the crisp paper inside. Lauren Ross. Not a disguise, not a rebellion, not an escape. A reality I had built with intention. I placed the document into a folder labeled identity and slid it into the drawer of my desk. As I closed it, I realized how different my life had become in such a short time. I didn't flinch waiting for a call. I didn't brace myself for someone needing something. The silence no longer echoed. The next morning at work, Daniel paused by my desk. "You look different," he said. "Lighter." "I think I am," I replied. He nodded, not asking for explanations, not digging for a story that wasn't his to know. "Good, you deserve some space to breathe." Later that week, during a team meeting, my name appeared on the project list. Lauren Ross, clean, confident, unburdened. No one questioned it. No one stumbled on it. In this city, in this office, my name didn't carry the weight of forgotten birthday gatherings or abandoned milestones. It carried only the weight I chose to give it. In the evenings, I returned to the small routines that made this new life feel real. I brewed coffee. I read on the balcony. I took long walks through quiet streets where the lights reflected on puddles like soft mirrors. Sometimes I thought of my family, but without anger, without longing, without the ache of wanting something they were never capable of giving. They had spent years forgetting to show up. In Minnesota, they realized the cost of that forgetfulness. But the consequence wasn't punishment. It was distance. A distance they had created long before I ever chose to follow it. One afternoon, I sat on the balcony with a notebook in my lap, the pages fluttering in the breeze. I wrote a small list, nothing dramatic, just things I wanted for myself now that I had room to want anything at all. A trip to the coast. A class I had always wanted to take. A new hobby. A future built on presence, not obligation. I closed the notebook and leaned back in the chair, letting the cool air settle around me. I wasn't hiding. I wasn't running. I wasn't reclaiming anything from them. I was simply standing somewhere I finally chose to be. My family spent years assuming I would always be available, always return, always bend. But they learned something the day they saw my new name in black ink on the guest book. Boundaries aren't walls. They're doors you stop opening. And some doors stay closed because you finally understand that you don't belong on the other side.